That countdown timer really bears an uncanny resemblance to the intro to the Q&A portion of the Climate Realism show. Anyway, we are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. So, you know how Minnesota has been a little bit sporty lately? A lot of us seem to have forgotten that this partially started because Somalian refugees were committing fraud at a very impressive scale. Well, it actually gets a lot worse when we look at the United States as a whole. Also, a few of our very own In the Tank crew, including myself, went to the lovely Swiss Alps to take a look for ourselves at what's going on with the World Economic Forum, and also to host our own antidote to the machinations of our would-be globalist overlords. And for Unhinged, we have female nurses posting pretty twisted and incriminating, frankly, commentary on TikTok again. So we are going to talk about all of this on episode 524 of the In the Tank podcast.
The United States Senate is voting on ICE's funding next week, and this is a group that does not deserve to be funded. Any senator who votes to continue to pay for this mob of unhinged murderers is out of their mind, because this cannot be retrained. This has to be stopped. So if you are a U.S. senator right now, do not write a fucking tweet. Do not write a fucking tweet. Write a bill. Write a bill that abolishes this heinous department.
You are made of stupid.
Oh, thank you for that one. She seems very stable. Also, I'd like to apologize to our audience in advance. I have two little extra dogs in my house because I am pet sitting, and they are real yappers. So you may end up hearing some dogs every once in a while. Anyway, so welcome to the In the Tank podcast, everyone. I am Linnea Lueken, your host, and as usual, we have Jim Lakely, Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute, Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow, Chris Talgo, Editorial Director and Socialism Research Fellow, and also everyone's favorite, the Donald Kendal, Director of the Glenn C. Haskins Emerging Issues Center. Before we get started, you guys, as always, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like the video. You can do that right now. If you're watching it live, hit the like. If you're watching it later, hit the like. And remember that sharing it helps us a lot when we are trying to break through some of YouTube's suppression. One of our regular viewers just pointed out on X that, most of the names or the X usernames of people on this show are unsearchable on X for whatever reason. So that's fun. That's been a problem that I've had even looking for the Heartland Institute's page, and I work there. So, leaving a comment helps us, sharing helps us. There's a lot of kind of weird suppression going on. And if you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving us a nice review on whatever platform you're using as well. All right, guys. How is everyone? It's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks since we last had this show.
Yeah, only a few things have happened in the world, right? I mean, there's not too much to go over.
Yeah, nothing to talk about, really.
I will say that whatever that intro video, all right, you got me. I agree with whatever you say. Just stay away from me. I'm way too intimidated by that lady. I don't even know who that is.
But yeah, she's a regular contributor on CNN as a political commentator. She's on the same show that the only person in CNN worth noting about is Scott Jennings. So she's often parrying with Scott Jennings, and he's rolling his eyes and stuff. But and I put that together, and I apologize. I thought I had covered up each one of the F-bombs she threw, and I let one slip through. So, oh well.
Well, she seemed very stable, so that was good. Nice. Thank you for that. I never watch in advance, so Jim posts the entry tags there. What are they called? I forget, Jim. You
can call it a stinger at the end.
Yeah, the stingers from the intro into the group chat, so everyone can see it before we actually launch the show, and I never watch them because I love being surprised when we go. So
What?
yeah, I might be putting us in a little bit of danger there, but I trust Jim mostly. All right. Well, I want to get us right into Unhinged then, even though that stinger there was definitely part of our Unhinged segment today. So, Andy, if you could bring up the video that we have for Unhinged. Yeah, this is about that. So we have, I believe this was posted to TikTok, and I think Libs of TikTok was the one who reported on it. But let's just take a look.
I thought of something good. I think it's something weird spot. Sabotage tactic, or at least scare tactic. All the medical providers, grab some syringes with needles on the end. Have them full of saline or succinylcholine, you know, whatever. That will probably be a deterrent. Be safe. Okay, for today's resistance tip, I vote, anybody got any poison ivy, poison oak in their yard? Get some of that up with gloves, obviously. Get it in some water, like a gallon of water. Get the poison ivy oak water, and I'm gonna put it into a water gun. Aim for faces, hands. All right, the single ladies where these ICE guys are going have a chance to do something, you know, not without risk, but could help the cause for sure. Get on Tinder, get on Hinge, find these guys. They're around. If they're an ICE agent, bring some X-Lax and put it in their drinks.
Oh.
Get them sick. You know, nobody's gonna die. Just enough to incapacitate them, get them off the street for the next day. Highly, easily deniable. You know, you could get sick too. Won't eat there again.
Oh my God.
I'm just saying. Let's get them where they eat. Somebody's not going to be supporting these guys. Where's the hotel where they eat? Who makes that breakfast? Let's find them. You know, let's make their lives fucking miserable.
Oh.
I know we're already trying to keep them awake all night.
Jim.
That's good. Anything you can do to make the living conditions bad. Talk to the people who work at the places where they are. Come up with some ideas. Dead fish. Somewhere in the room hidden. Just stay toxic.
So some of that is definitely illegal to be instructing people to do on a public forum, and she absolutely should not be allowed to practice medicine of any kind. She should not be a front desk worker at a 24-hour urgent care with that perspective. You know, all after this, between this and like the COVID stuff that women were posting on TikTok, like these nurses were posting online for everyone to see, talking about like what they would do to people who came in unvaccinated and stuff. I legitimately have I moved to this new place a couple years ago, and I still haven't found a GP, in part because of my paranoia over this stuff.
Oh man, I don't understand. Like this, like what's next? She's gonna. This is how you construct an improvised explosive device. You know, like where's the limit here? Jim, I think you commented that, like, you know, she rightfully lost her job after that. Please tell me that's accurate.
Yeah, she was a nurse at VCU Hospital, which is in Virginia, and yeah, she lost her job. You know, I thought the dancing nurses during COVID was bad. You know, it was almost a mockery of proper healthcare, and during COVID, we were told that our hospitals, especially our healthcare providers, doctors and nurses, were overwhelmed with all of the sick people coming in, and they're so brave and they're heroes. And then hundreds of videos of nurses and doctors, dancing in hospitals, for TikTok, for likes, made you think, that's weird. And why would somebody do that and publicly release it? And that was just dancing. That was silly. We live in a pretty, I think people are sick, and our culture is sick in a lot of ways. But what's weird is that it's all being televised and shared. I'm amazed at how often people who have very vile things to say decide to pull out their phone and say it into their phone camera and then post it on TikTok and then promote it and wanting likes for it. Never once in this whole process do any of these people say, you know what, I'm going to delete that. Maybe I shouldn't say that. And in this case, it's a nurse, somebody who is supposed to save your life, help care for you if you are sick or injured, giving advice on how to hurt, maybe even kill, depending on what you put in that syringe. Federal agents who are carrying out arrests to enforce the immigration laws that we have on the books that were, by the way, passed by Democrats. That should never go unsaid, that these laws that are so draconian and fascist, supposedly, were the laws that were passed by Democrats. So let's be clear about that. But it's just sick. It makes me sick to see this. And when you see something like this, you understand that this is the one person who is saying it out loud into their phone to put on TikTok. And there are many, many others who think and will act this very same way, who are not putting it out on their social media feeds. But this her career is now ruined. Nobody should really take joy in that, especially if she was good at her job. But it is worth it and righteous, because nobody should be getting care from a woman who is that unhinged and thinks that way. Not just that she wouldn't give care to an ICE agent that happened to be, come into the hospital, but that she would actively look to harm, or even potentially, I guess, have that ICE agent die. And that's preferable. Our country has been whipped up into a complete frenzy based on lies that the mainstream media tells. We talk about this on this podcast all the time. There are people in your life, people in your family, who live in a complete bubble and believe absolute falsehoods about some very important topics. And it is really hard to have a conversation about, how we should run our society when at least half this country is completely deranged and misinformed by lies told by the legacy media. And we're seeing what happens now. It gets into a very dangerous place, and that dangerous place happens to be Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yeah, and I see in the comments, sorry, Chris, just 1 second, people saying, oh, well, hopefully this is just talk, this is just political tribalism, chest thumping stuff. They shot Charlie Kirk and they all cheered about it. It's not just talk. They really mean it. They really mean it.
Right.
I was just going to broaden this out a little bit. So I did see a really good article on Laura Ingram's show a couple days ago with a doctor. I'm going to guess he was about in his mid 60s, and he was telling Laura that many of the up and coming nurses and doctors that he's working with have been completely brainwashed in med school. And, he cited a bunch of examples how the woke ideology has really been, in that space for a very long time. So I think to some degree, this woman is symbolic of that. But I also think that what's going on with these women, and I don't know her exact situation. I don't know if she's, married or has children. I'm going to say I doubt that she does, because what I've noticed is a lot of the women who are just up in arms about ICE, whether it's in Minneapolis or whether it's her, in Virginia, I think a lot of this is the misplaced maternal instinct. And, I can't take credit for this. I've heard a lot of other people, talking about this, writing about this, that a lot of these women are probably, they're unfulfilled. They're missing like a central element in their life. And I'm not trying to say that all women are only mothers and caretakers and all that. I'm not saying that at all whatsoever. But I do think that by nature, women have a a propensity to be nurturing and caretaking, and when that is used against ICE agents or police officers or whomever, that can be super dangerous. So to me, I think I'm a little more interested in trying to understand why she's doing what she's doing. To me, it's obvious that she's wrong, and I wonder also if she would actually do this or if this is all just talk. So those are just a couple of things that running through my mind as I've been watching this for the past couple of days. And just she's not alone. There have been many other nurses who have been coming out and saying the same thing. So last time I checked the Hippocratic Oath, you're supposed to do no harm, and this does not look like they are intending to uphold the Hippocratic Oath. So, I don't believe in cancel culture, but I do think that this woman has no place in the hospital environment or nursing care or caretaking, because she has obviously demonstrated that she's not willing to put aside her political biases and help someone in the time of need. And that to me is, what this is really all about. And think about this. How about all the medical people that are, in the Army, Navy, and what do? They have to help enemy combatants if they're wounded on the field. So this is just so jaw-dropping to me.
Yeah, it's unfortunately not jaw-dropping to me. I've seen this a lot, and they are serious. It's not just joking. They live in like a television world where they're the superheroes who are fighting, the evil empire that's got their boot on their throat. So it's, to them, it's worth it.
The woman's comments are obviously somewhat insane. However, this isn't happening in a vacuum. She didn't develop these thoughts just because she went out there and she saw ICE agents doing horrible things and is responding to that. This is coming from Tim Walz, from Mayor Fry, from the press all across the country, who are telling people that they're demonizing. Frankly, they're demonizing our Border Patrol. They're demonizing ICE. They're demonized, as they've been demonizing the Trump administration and anyone who doesn't oppose it vigorously, let alone endorse anything about it. So this kind of demonization leads to dehumanization, and it makes people feel like anything they do is just okay. And that's a real problem. We've got to hold people responsible for the things that they say. But that starts at the top. That starts with public officials and the media, and we haven't done that. They have gotten away with.
I can't get past though. I really can't get past the fact that she is basically de facto saying that she values rapists, murderers, the worst of the worst. She's more concerned with them than protecting the people who are putting their lives on the line, literally, to go and bring those people, to justice. That is just such a shocking, contradiction.
Well, I am curious about just like the what causes the radicalization, because that's totally what this person is, an absolute radical. What causes the radicalization of this? And I'll go like a step further than what Sam was saying, that I think that this is a symptom of a very tight echo chamber type system that's derived from advanced algorithms that are feeding her TikTok with the most deranged stuff possible. So she's thriving in this like little media bubble where like the most insane stuff is coming across her feed, and that to her is normal, and that to her is justified, and she's just contributing to the same sort of thing. I'm making a series of assumptions here, but like I know from research that I've done on these sorts of things that this concept of you being in an echo chamber, that was a term that was come up with, I don't know, a couple of decades ago. The version of it that exists today is 1,000 times more powerful and has 1,000 times more of a radicalizing, implications. And one kind of a small example of that, there was a video that came out just recently of the one guy that was like shot, in the protests that were going on. There was a video that came out of him like, kicking an ICE truck and spitting on an ICE truck or something like that. And this was shared on Reddit, and don't go to Reddit if you've haven't been there. It's just the worst cesspool you could have possibly imagined. But the debate on Reddit about this video was whether or not it was AI generated. And seemingly the consensus amongst all of these people was that it was an AI generated video. So it's like, on one hand, when it comes to AI generated videos, it can, allow for disinformation, but it also gives people a reasonable justification to just dismiss video evidence that doesn't comport with their worldview. So we're in a very strange world when it comes to this concept of an echo chamber. And I think that nurse right there is a casualty of this phenomenon that we're experiencing.
Tanya, I think that's a really good point. I just wonder, why do you think that she chooses to put herself in that echo chamber? Because I can only use myself as an example. I try to take all perspectives into play before I make a decision. It seems like she's only taking one very biased perspective into play and just completely ignoring any other arguments.
Well, the thing is with a lot of these, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or even Reels on Facebook or whatever, it's very passive. You're just, the algorithm is generated based on just how much of that attention that it gets from you. If you quickly scan off of something, some conservative making a good point, you scan off of it and you sit there and watch, some deranged lunatic talk about the resistance against ICE. Then the algorithm is going to feed you more of that stuff. So a lot of this is passive. You almost can't help it. You get sucked into it. And the whole point of these social media things is to keep your attention. This is an attention economy. They're trying to keep you on the app. So they're not going to show you anything that challenges your worldview, because I'm sure the statistics show that, enough of those videos will cause somebody to turn it off and turn something else on. So they're just feeding you what you think you want. It happens on the left and the right. The biggest benefit on the right, though, is that we inherently have to see the media of the left, because that's constantly just the mainstream. So, any echo chamber that you might get when it comes to social media is kind of balanced out by just everything else that's out there. But yeah, when it comes to the left, I think it's even more pervasive.
And I will say that, Donnie, you make a good point that almost all the coverage I've seen on CNN and MS Now has been completely on the side that Renee Good was an innocent bystander and Alex Preddy was totally innocent bystander, and that they were literally murdered, for no reason whatsoever. And obviously that is a very not just biased view and actually, frankly, dishonest account of what actually occurred. So Donnie, I agree with you that these people have been just put in these echo chambers where they don't want to even hear or consider the other side. And that's really dangerous.
Let's be clear about what's going on in Minneapolis too. These Alex Preddy was not a protester; he was an insurrectionist. He's part of a revolution. It's a revolutionary army. It's revolutionaries out there on the streets of Minnesota. These are not people protesting. He was not holding a sign. They are very well organized in signal chats. They have radio communications. I've seen several. On X talk about, this is not something people in the echo chamber that this nurse is on would never see a post like this on Twitter. But I've seen several people who have special ops experience in Iraq and Afghanistan saying that when another journalist had actually revealed the communications in Signal, which is an encrypted chat service app, and some of the documents that they've been sharing around, other things like that. And he says this is on par with the sophistication of the insurgencies that he was fighting in Iraq 20 years ago. In fact, it might even be more sophisticated. So this is not a protest. Alex Preddy wasn't protesting and then just murdered by an ICE agent with an itchy trigger finger. He was, for apparently the third or fourth time, attacking ICE agents. Because their revolutionary leaders are telling people. The lieutenant governor of Minnesota put out a video on TikTok or whatever, one of those verticals, just like we showed at the top of this show, telling people to put their bodies on the line. For what? For revolution. And that's what these people are doing. And if you put your body on the line and you get shot because you are wrestling with armed federal agents, it's very dangerous and you could die. And 2 people have already died. doing that. I really hope there aren't any more. But we have to understand what is truly going on in Minnesota, and it is not protest. It is not peaceably assembling. It is not the proper expression and of your First Amendment rights. It is revolution. This is a real insurgency. This is not January 6th, clowning and rioting. This is what an actual insurgency looks like. And unlike on January 6th, I don't believe anybody that went to the Capitol that day had a firearm on them. And here we had the second person who was killed was armed. And just to tie it back to that nurse, if you are marinating in the propaganda of revolution all the time, then yes, it seems kind of exciting. You want to do your part. And I guess doing your part as a nurse is instructing people on very helpful tips on how to injure or perhaps even poison and kill federal agents and people who are not down with the revolution. This is Sam is old enough to remember I was a child, but in the 1970s, we had movements like this. The Capitol was bombed. We had the Weather Underground carrying out legitimate terroristic activities in service of a leftist revolution. Those days are back, and it's not good.
I also do. I know we're probably going to move on here in a second, Linnea, but I also do think that there's some fallout from George Floyd and the quote war on cops. And I know that these aren't cops per se, but they are law enforcement officials. And I think that in places like Minneapolis, New York City, places in Chicago, they just have utter contempt for anyone who is trying to enforce the law, whether it be a Chicago Police Department officer or a Border Patrol agent. So I think that's just another consequence of the George Floyd and even going back to Michael Brown and all that stuff from years ago.
I think we also need to consider how much of this is bought and paid for and by whom. We're really in the midst of a slow motion color revolution in this country. And the process is following the same process that was done in other countries. It's being financed clearly by European billionaires. I wouldn't be surprised if some of it's coming from China, Russia, other places like that. So this is a real thing that is not just accident. None of this is just falling into place because people are mad at ICE for getting rid of murderers and rapists. This is something much bigger than that, and it is. We're finding out more and more about how corrupt this system is.
Absolutely. Well, and yes, I do want to move along here, unfortunately. I mean, this is an interesting discussion. We could really have a whole show just on this topic alone and kind of covering all the history of, left-wing revolutionary movements and stuff and how unfun those are. But we do have to move on. And Sam, I'm gonna hand the floor to you again in a couple seconds here, but you wrote up a great essay in your Life, Liberty, Property newspaper. Wow, I really fumbled that one. Newsletter, which our dear viewers / listeners can also subscribe to and read. And pardon me, Sam, for reading to you from your own work, but you wrote, your post was titled, "The Fraud is Worse Than You Ever Imagined." You wrote, U.S. taxpayers have been victimized by at least $36 billion and possibly as much as $3 trillion in fraud through federal government entitlement programs since 2020. Just since 2020, guys. And that was from an investigative report by the Center Square. The higher number is far more than most sources have suggested in the past. Later, you write, public safety net programs such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid lost billions of dollars to scams each year. And the DOJ documents suggest fraudsters hit Medicare and Medicaid in particular the hardest. The DOJ documents suggest that the amount of fraud rose rapidly between 2020 and 2025. The reporter on this says that the figure for the first half of the year for Medicare and Medicaid is more than twice the $6 billion in fraud to federal health programs that the Justice Department identified in September 2020. He documents several cases in which medical professionals defrauded the federal government for literally hundreds of millions of dollars apiece. And Sam, you said that the very design of Medicaid rewards theft and invites corruption. So what did you mean by that? And kind of give us the easy description, easy to understand description of what's going on here.
Yes, thank you, Linnea. The way Medicaid works, of course, is that there's a federal matching grant. And really, most of the money that is spent on Medicaid comes from the federal government. So it comes from taxpayers from all 50 states and so on and so forth. So what happens is if you as a state can get people into Medicaid that don't belong there, the federal government, the other states' taxpayers pay for that. So you basically make a nice profit that way. And it's what I call the dual funding stream. So what this dual funding stream does is inherently encourage expansion of the rolls. And the only way to expand the rolls beyond what's legal is to expand them illegally. And that happens. And so what happens is what you see in Minnesota, only it's happening in all 50 states and much bigger than even what we've seen in Minnesota, which is that the states will routinely add people without checking whether they're truly eligible for, say, Medicaid. And then once they're on the program, they don't check anymore. They don't check to make sure that they're still eligible, that they're still alive. They don't check any of that. And then, of course, they don't check to make sure that nobody in another state, that they're not getting Medicaid from another state. So you have people who have Medicaid in multiple states, 6, 7 states. So you put all that together and you find that there is an incredible amount of fraud going on. And the federal government, they estimated, the Government Accountability Office estimated in 2024 that based on data from 2018 to 2022, the government was defrauded of $233 billion to $520 billion every year. So that's basically $250 billion to $500 billion every year. And now remember that we now know that it increased starting in 2020. So that was 2018 to 2022. It's much higher than that now. And so the amount of fraud is actually incalculable at this point. And there's going to take a whole lot of work to find out really what it is. But one thing we know is that these programs are nowhere near being limited to the people who are truly needy, who need it. And people are, among the people who are taking advantage of these programs are state governments. There's a scam that I outline in the piece, which I recommend people read, and then also the insurance companies, because every person who's on Medicaid illegally actually is being insured by an insurer illegally. So that money is going to an insurance company that isn't doing anything for the person who's on the roster there. So this is not just a horrific scam, it is a gigantic, colossal scandal, and it's absolutely terrible. Because it's not just going to take down Medicaid. It'll take down the entire entitlement regime of this country within probably 8 years. So because we're on schedule to simply not be able to meet our bills as our federal government in 2034. So that's 8 years out. And it moved back a year last year. So now if it moves back another year, that's 2033 and so on and so forth. This is, as I say, a scandal of enormous proportions.
Oh, we'll be well into the robot takeover by then. So,
yeah. So who cares? No. Is there any way, or really, is there any motivation to actually crack down on any of this? Because it seems like it wouldn't be all that hard to track down and put a stop to.
Well, that's the problem. That's the problem. There is no motivation at present, or there was no motivation leading up to this. There is now because the federal government has, under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, they included requirements for transparency and making sure of eligibility. But states are going to lie about that. There has to be much more done, and I make some recommendations in the piece about what needs to happen.
I do have one good piece of news. So on January 8th, the President of the United States established a new Department of Justice Division for National Fraud Enforcement. I'm reading it off the White House fact sheet right now. And one of the things that it is going to do is the Department of Housing and Urban Development has especially teamed to Minnesota to investigate possible housing fraud. The Department of Labor is currently conducting a targeted review of Minnesota's unemployment insurance scam program. The Department of Agriculture has demanded Minnesota conduct recertifications for its SNAP recipients. So, at least there is action at the federal level. I think that President Trump has made it super clear that he thinks that this is, intolerable and that he is going to do something about it. And if there's anyone who can, and will do something about it, I do think it's, President Trump. So obviously, I don't think this is like, it's going to be the panacea that's just going to get rid of all fraud in the country in, one fell swoop. But the fact that the Department of Justice is actually, putting some resources behind this and saying, listen, we're going to come here, we're going to examine the roles, and we're going to make sure that there is, no funny business going on here. That in and of itself is at least a really good thing. And as it's shown on the screen right now, they already did cut $10 billion in funding from HHS to Minnesota and some other states because of their just blatant fraud and corruption.
That is a good process that they're going through. The problem that we have, though, is that the system itself is absolutely conducive to fraud. It's monumentally conducive to that, and that has to change. And there are policies that we can put in place that will fix that. This has gone on for decades now. Decades. The amount that this country has wasted on thieves and grifters is absolutely mind-blowing. It's in the trillions of dollars and in the many trillions.
Sam, you say there's no incentive to stop this fraud. There actually is, and it needs to be implemented with great force. And that's sending these efforts to jail. I know we like to have fun on this show, and I usually like to smile and crack a few jokes. I'm going to have a really hard time smiling at all in this podcast today, based on our topic stuff. And this one really, really burns me. This country is drowning in debt. That debt is mortgaging the future of generations now of Americans, and it's becoming increasingly clear that a big chunk of that debt is fraud and theft. With this level of fraud, I mean, let's be honest, and it's been going on, as you said, Sam, for decades and decades. Certainly, we have no moral obligation to pay taxes into a system like this. Now, of course, we have a legal obligation, because if you don't pay your taxes into this, our thieving, grifting government and officials, if you don't pay your taxes, you go to jail. So you'll go to jail, but the people stealing your money and putting it in their pockets or sending it overseas to their family or terrorist groups in Somalia, they're not going to go to jail. At least I don't have any confidence that anybody's going to go to jail for any of this stuff. But the amount of fraud, theft, and corruption in our government is literally almost impossible to comprehend. And you really can't comprehend it. That's putting aside all the inside trading and the way how Ilhan Omar can have a net worth of $50,000 one year and $30 million the next. How does that happen? It does not happen legitimately. It can't happen legitimately unless she's waving a lottery ticket that has winning numbers on it that we missed. That is corruption. That is theft. That is criminal activity. And our society is being governed by criminals and their enablers. Just the back in the 80s, again, I always like to show my age. I was a teenager then, but I remember that there was a lot of discussion about how cold-hearted and mean Republicans were under, especially Ronald Reagan, because they wanted to cut welfare benefits for the needy, and they're going to throw them out on the streets. And don't you care? Don't you care about people and their plights and if they're suffering? Of course, the answer is yes. Of course we care about people, and we want to give them a helping hand if they truly need it. And we've completely thrown that away, and we have people, a minority group of Somalians in Minnesota that take money literally out of the hands of families that have autistic kids, pretend they have autistic kids when they don't, they're fake, take that money, put it in their pockets, give it to Democrat politicians so that everybody looks away so that this graph could go on and on and on. Daycare centers that don't have any kids in them, a building with home healthcare businesses, one building with 15 home healthcare businesses in it. in a shitty part of town, which nobody would ever visit. You have transportation companies supposedly taking poor old people to their doctor's appointments that don't actually have any vehicles or any drivers. It's the entire, and that is one little instance in one town, in one city in the United States, of all these scams going on that have stolen literally billions of dollars. What do you think's happening in California? What do you think's happening here in this corrupt, state of Illinois? The scale of this is unimaginable. When Elon Musk was doing, and Doge was a thing, and Republicans said we're going to do what Doge says, and they did nothing. But Elon Musk made what I thought was cannot be true statement that if we got rid of just the thievery and the fraud and actually had the government account for every dollar that goes out and make sure it goes to the right person, we wouldn't only just get rid of the budget deficit, we'd be running a huge budget surplus. Now I believe him. And unless people start going to jail, I'm very glad, Chris, that you mentioned that the Trump administration is now, putting us, establishing some task forces to go after this. People need to go to jail. I am sick and tired of hearings in Congress where nothing happens. I'm tired of seeing stories and videos on social media, and then nothing happens. The Biden Justice Department, they bragged about it over and over. We've made 1,500 arrests for January 6th. People who were in chat rooms with people who were in Washington, D.C. got arrested and went to jail. Unless people that are ripping us off like this go to jail, I don't want to hear another word about it from anybody in Congress. There has to be consequences for this. There has to be. If not, we don't have a country. We're broke. And then, there's no hope for anything. I'm really black-pilled on this. I'm sorry. So I'm not going to smile.
I am just as fed up with this as you are, Jim. But to me, one of the blessings in disguise here is that it's actually being talked about. And, I'll go back. I agree with you, during the 80s and 90s when I was a kid, I don't think there was nearly as much corruption. And I remember Bill Clinton announcing that the era of big government's over in, I think, 99 or 2000. And one of the main reasons why this can be perpetuated at this scale is because of big government. So, there is something to be said about, having the government actually get out of the business of, providing welfare benefits to people that do not need nor deserve welfare benefits. I think we're moving, in that direction. I don't think it's going to happen, in a day, a month, or a year. It might take a decade. But the fact that the conversation is actually happening, and thank God for Nick Shirley for going there and exposing this. It took a pseudo journalist to uncover this. Why wasn't the New York Times, reporting on this? Why wasn't the Washington Post reporting about this? Why aren't major newspapers in Minneapolis reporting about this? Because they don't want to. They want to keep it, hidden. And finally, it is coming, to the surface here. And I think that the more the American people learn about it, the more pissed off they're going to get. But I also do think that there's a cultural aspect of this. And the founding fathers said, you got to have a virtuous society in order for a republic to maintain itself. Do we have a virtuous society when almost half the people are saying, how can I get from the government which will be funded by the other half of the people? I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, that's, and good points from people in our audience here, pointing out, Ralph here points out that you're asking the criminals to educate the crimes, and that's pretty true there. So there's one other thing that I wanted to bring up in this segment before we get to our main topic today, and that is a thread that I saw just this morning on X, where somebody pointed out the number of apparently, customerless businesses that take up a lot of major retail space in downtown areas. I'm sure everyone who lives in the United States has seen this, probably other countries too. You just have lines and lines of these little businesses that you just drive past every day. And you're like, who goes to these places? They never have cars in front of them. They're not shut down. They say they're open. So what is going on here? And I want to read a bit from this post, because it is just fascinating what this person has to report. This is from X user by the username Rambo Van Halen, which is pretty good. And he says, I often wonder how much of our economy is fake. Back in the day in Los Angeles, there was a prevalence of cell phone accessory stores. sometimes several per block. I've seen those in Chicago and in Las Vegas as well. We'd film on these dumpy commercial streets and be working in front of these shops for days, but we wouldn't see a single customer enter or exit. The off-duty cops we hired for traffic control explained that it's all money laundering. Same with the bodegas, vape shops, and most of the restaurants. In Los Angeles and many other cities, there are miles and miles of streets full of businesses with no customers. And yes, most of them are owned by immigrants. And there was another story from San Francisco that he tells where he said, a new Asian hot dog place opened in my neighborhood. It looked cute from the outside, and I thought it might have good food. So I went in and ordered a hot dog. The cute Asian girl disappeared into the kitchen, and she doesn't come out for a long time. So eventually he peeks around the corner into the kitchen, and to my surprise, he writes, there was no kitchen. It was just an empty room, no fridge or stove or food. And there was no cute Asian girl. She'd left. She had my money, though, so I stuck around to see what the F was going on. And a few minutes later, she returned with a hot dog. I have no idea where she got it from. So this raises some questions, because in San Francisco, the health department grade must be placed on the window of the restaurant, and the fake hot dog place had a 99% rating, probably because they had no food on the premises. So somebody from the city of Francisco inspected and passed a fake restaurant. So the inspectors were probably on the take, and at best they looked the other way. These shops take up a ton of retail space. It's a lot of real estate. And retail space, especially in San Francisco and Los Angeles, is expensive, mainly because the cheap space is taken up with fake businesses. And he goes on to point out, how many honest entrepreneurial Americans could be running their own small businesses with storefronts, but aren't doing so because the rent is so high. Once you start looking for fake businesses, you can't stop seeing them. So next time you're driving around your city, look at the dumpy commercial strips and the dirty store windows, and look at the crappy strip malls with peeling paint, cracked signs, and empty potholed parking lots, and ask yourself, how much of this is fake? So, yeah, I mean, that's something that I've noticed a million times too. Everyone's got the, why are there, 6 vape shops in the like 3 square blocks here that I never see anybody in or whatever. And it's very suspicious. And it makes me wonder, between this and between all the fake businesses that they've discovered in Minneapolis, really how much of our economy is built off of supporting these businesses that aren't even real, that don't even have any customers.
I remember driving through west side of Chicago one time, and I saw a sign hanging out of a brick building, and it said wigs and cigarettes. Now, any sign that has that says that, I actually say I think that's legit.
Yeah.
But why are there 10 mattress stores within 5 miles of my house with no customers ever in there and no cars in the parking lot? And when I lived in Fredericksburg, Virginia, I used to walk from the newspaper I worked at. I used to walk down the street to a pizza parlor and get pizza for lunch once in a while. And I walked past a exotic Persian rugs store. Never, ever was there anybody ever inside that place. They probably had $3 million worth of rugs hanging in there, but they were all dusty. The same ones were hanging in there for 20 years. And I always think, how do businesses like this survive? How do they pay the rent? Of course, it has to be a criminal front. And there's probably, as that wonderful tweet from Rambo Van Halen said, once you start looking for fake businesses, you can't stop looking for them. And I'm going to start looking real hard.
Yeah, I actually saw a video. It was just like a police, chest cam video or something like that. And it was like they were responding to somebody supposedly like had a heart attack in the back of like this one business. So they go into this like what looked like a terrible little convenience store, and they're asking the clerk, and the clerk's like, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about." And there's like, they look around, and there's just like a handful of things on the shelves. Anyways, as you get like further into the video, they discover that there is a padlock door. They clip the padlock off the door, and back behind this fake convenience store was like a bunch of these like poker machines and gambling machines, and there's people in this room. They're padlocked into the room. And it was just like that whole fake convenience store was just a front for this like little gambling shop in the back, So I can't imagine how like wide scale some of this stuff is, but I definitely have anecdotally had those thoughts of just like, how is this place in business? Anyone that's like ever run like a small business, Like, that the margins are never fantastic, and the idea that you're going to be able to like pay a rent on a building and still be able to make a profit off of selling your product is like doesn't seem that easy. So yeah, you look at some of these places, you're just like, how are they making their rent? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's one thing, to have an illegal, business going. At least that place had an illegal business that was actually like producing some kind of income in it.
Sure.
But I think a lot of these don't have any of that. They're literally just some kind of like an insurance front or something, like just some weird scam. One of the comments that this guy makes, or someone makes in his thread there, I've closed the thread, but the point that he makes is that he used to think that, oh, well, I wish these little businesses, these cute little businesses would like clean up their storefront and stuff, because then they'd actually get customers. And then he says that he realized like that's the point is they make sure that it looks really crappy on purpose so that they don't get customers looking for a business that doesn't exist. And I thought that was like 90% of the North Chicago suburb strip malls. I couldn't help but think of all of those because they're just like repellent and you never see anyone there, but they're open. Maybe. And they all have really good reviews on Google.
It really does bring to light and bring to front of mind how much corruption there is in this country. It's really mind-blowing, and it should be somewhat terrifying that we are in fact living in the world's biggest and most prosperous banana republic.
Well, me and Linnea were talking about this story. This is like totally unrelated, but there's like evidence that's coming out that like, China's population is actually like way overstated to the tune of like hundreds of millions of people or something like that. And it's just like, wow, we've all just existed in this universe where China's population is 1.8 billion people or something. And then we wake up tomorrow and find out like, actually, maybe it's only like 70% that number. And it's like, I just wonder how much of that same kind of sentiment exists in all of these things. Like, how much of the economy is actually real? Do we even know?
It is like we're living in a simulation.
Yeah.
Okay, before we get too far into that, yeah, so again, there is a lot of fraud out there, you guys, but you will never be taken advantage of by Ira Bershatsky from Advisor Metals. And so here you are. A lot of people in the conservative, libertarian, and even just plain old prepper spaces are going to hit you with advertisements for buying precious metals. They're not wrong that they are a good investment, but you want to be careful about who you buy your metals from. Here at In the Tank and also on the Climate Realism Show, we trust Advisor Metals over all of those other guys, and that's because we know that the person running the place is the best of the best. A great friend of Liberty, Ira Bershatsky owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. But what does that mean for you? Well, it means everything Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be factual. So there is no sketchy sales pitch or bait and switch. Ira is held to the highest ethical standards, and there is full transparency, which is way too lacking in basically half of our economy today. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you're planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty, if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. He is going to make it super easy for you. So please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. Go to climaterealismshow.com/metals, and when you talk to Ira, make sure you let him know who sent you. That helps us as you are helping your financial future by diversifying with precious metals from Advisor Metals. How about that one? All right.
That's an all-timer racket.
How about the price of gold and silver right now?
Yeah, no kidding.
get into that because it's only going to get crazier from here. So, this is a very special next segment here because it's mostly going to focus on Donald and myself because we had a very unique experience last week. I said at the start of the show that the reason our scheduling for both this show and the Climate Realism show has been irregular this year is because the Heartland Institute decided a little bit last minute that we were going to run counter programming to the World Forum's program in Davos. So now we could have hosted our World Prosperity Forum, the first of hopefully many, in the United States and just like Zoom called the participants there. But we wanted to get a lot of really great European speakers, and we did. And so we ultimately decided that in person would be better for everyone. And plus, we wanted to add a little bit of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere and warm up the a little bit. So Donald, myself, Jim, and other Heartlanders went over to Zurich, Switzerland, and hosted the inaugural World Prosperity Forum and filmed all of the speakers. It's all on our YouTube page. And Andy has been tirelessly working on breaking those live streams down into manageable pieces for you guys, separated out by the individual speakers' presentations. So you guys can go and see all of it. Meanwhile, Donald and I, along with our good friend Mark Morano, took a day trip to go up to Davos and to see what the globalists were up to ourselves. So we have put together our little presentation here, and Andy has selected the most important photograph of the reel for you. So we hunted around, we took the train up there, and then we walked around in Davos, Switzerland, which is the fancy ski resort that they use for these World Economic Forum conferences. And we searched because I really wanted to find, and of course Donald also wanted to find, the like green zone, because we had an inkling that it was not going to be quite as upfront, and populous as it has been in previous years. And so indeed, there was a little bit of a confusion in focus at the Green Hub this year. One of the things that we saw right away was that they had a nice little display about the World Ayahuasca Forum. So that was fun. And the guys who were sitting around that little area looked exactly what you would expect. And there was also a little table showing, demonstrating the wonders of mushrooms.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Not the normal eating kind, but the other kind. They also had demonstrations of eating mushrooms. We went inside of the venue where they were hosting their breakout sessions, and inside of that venue they had like some kind of like greeny bar thing that they had food that was indecipherable. Not really sure what was going on in there.
All the
lame,
alternatives
actually.
To coffee or something like that.
Yeah, just weird, like that stupid mushroom coffee stuff, like all that crap. And so, and they had these little flyers around. I liked the one that I held up in this picture, which was the "all you need is less" advertisement. So they're not getting rid of that, what's the word? Deindustrialization and stuff push. They're still doing it. They just are trying to be a little bit quieter about it this year. And we sat in on about, 10 minutes maybe. I think I sat in the longest. I think I was probably there for 15 or 20 minutes in this breakout session panel that we were listening to that was about something called like an ecological index score or something like that. Anyway, it was dumb and boring, and it was a bunch of finance people talking about ways that they could ruin the rest of us, basically, just as what you would expect. But and I wrote a little article about this, but that ended up in Washington Times. But one of the funniest things that I heard this guy say that was also a little bit threatening, one of the members of that panel, who is the, a finance guy who's in charge of one of the, sustainability focused groups, had this quote where he said something along the lines of, we're trying to keep, no one is shouting from the rooftops what they're doing about sustainability right now for obvious and various reasons. And what he's obviously implying is that Trump is making things uncomfortable in the United States for finance companies and stuff that were super into the ESG stuff. And they are not stopping the ESG stuff. They're just rebranding it again, and they're trying to keep it a little bit quiet. But Donald, you had some really great experiences and you had some great stuff that you wanted to talk about on this. So I'm going to, I'd like to start it off for you with what is something that struck you the most? Because both of us said multiple times while we were walking around how weird it was.
Yes.
And all the people there were like the weirdest people you've ever seen. And not because they looked super weird, but they were just like airheads. It was
it was the most surreal experience that I've ever been a part of. We took this 2.5 hour train ride through the Swiss Alps and all of that, which was fantastic. And we get spit out into this the ski town, and the entire town, like you hear about Davos and you kind of imagine some conference hall or something like that. But when you actually get there, it is this just miles long, just like almost festival like atmosphere. But it's a festival like atmosphere that is like almost inherently contradictory, because like you'll be walking down and you've got like you'll walk out and there's like the Black Rock Pavilion. There's all these like huge name things. The Meta had their own little area. Palantir had their own little area. You see these people in these nice suits and all of that. And then you see like a cross-dressing cow handing out T-shirts, over here, and a flyers for the World Ayahuasca, forum over there. And it's just like, I think I said during one of the presentations that it was like Burning Man meets LinkedIn. It was just a very strange combination of stuff going on, and it was like throughout the entire town. So the train stop was at one end. We walked it had to have been like 1.5 miles, 2 miles maybe, from one end all the way to the other, where you get to these like cement gates or these cement blocks blocking the road. And that's as far as the plebes can go. So you see in this picture right here, it's guarded by a GQ model. He wouldn't let you pass. The dogs in the background. I just sillily walked over there, and they stopped me. They're like, "Do you have a pass?" I said, "Oh, no, I don't." They're like, "Get out of here." So like, that's about as far as I could go.
You got bullied by Zoolander? Come on. That's...
Yes. Yeah. And there's the picture that I took over the gate. And it's funny because that's where all of like the hardcore World Economic Forum branding was. Surely that's where all the VIPs were. And you can see on the bottom left of that picture, no entry. Like we weren't allowed. We couldn't get, over there. As we're walking down the street, you see these helicopters flying off. And it's just like, well, there's a VIP either landing or arriving or leaving. So just cycle through some of these pictures. It'll jog my memory on some of the experiences that we had. All right. So right here, this is this was outside. What we're seeing in the background actually is the climate hub of this. So in that back little brick building over there is where the little it's like a retrofitted cafe that Linnea was describing. The little theater was inside of that. Outside of this was just a bunch of various climate related stuff. They had kind of a cool little putt-putt golf thing, except for it was with hockey sticks and a hockey puck. Right there is a green car, which I made a joke during one of the presentations that it's like, Elon Musk is doing his darndest to make electric vehicles cool, but this is the real electric vehicle. I think you could pick this up. If you had to dust underneath it.
They did pick it up. They were moving it around, and they had another one that they were giving people rides in or something. Although I think it was like a single person driver. And when they get it close, it was so slippery that they couldn't like drive it onto that little hill. So what they would do is they would just get out and like manhandle it back into its parking spot.
Yeah, they couldn't get over like the 6 inches of compacted snow, so they had to like push it into the spot.
It looks like a strap-on roller skate.
Right. All right, so the next picture. So this was right behind that policeman and the car over there was a bunch of protesters, and the protesters were at that cement kind of gate that I was talking about. The roadblocks. So it's just beyond where those protesters are. So that's like as far as you can get to the main thing. Like I said, out front there was a big protest going on. I think at that time it was related to Iran. But right next to it, you could see, and I make sure to frame the picture like this to include this little area that was like the Palantir Pavilion. And I said to Linnea, I'm like, all of those protesters have all of their like facial recognition data like gathered by Palantir. Must be, because I don't know why else they would have been set up right next to the protest area, which was like seriously the designated protest area from as far as I could tell. All right, go on to another picture. GQ model, already mentioned that guy. No entry. Okay, yeah, Linnea got to take a picture with the most horrible looking,
the most disturbing polar bear ever.
Yeah, I didn't think that climate change was killing polar bears until this experience happened. This guy looks a little worn for the wear.
That's nightmare fuel, man. Look at that.
I know. I told Linnea to let's get a picture of you with the polar bear. And as soon as he put his arm around her, I was like, that probably wasn't a good idea. But she survived. She survived. All right.
I took a flea bath when I got home, but otherwise I'm okay.
These were people kidnapping a robot down the street, which I thought was really interesting. At one point, the couple of robots were walking past me. I abandoned Linnea so I could take pictures of it. But yeah, they were dragging this robot down the street. This is my favorite story. So when we were outside the climate hub, I was real hungry. But I was just going to wait for dinner when we got back. But they were cooking outside the climate hub these delicious smelling things. And there's you could tell they're making these sausages, but it's outside the climate hub. So it's got to be made out of bugs or something like that. Soy. So when we were walking back, Linnea goes up and asks, what are these made out of? And the lady who didn't, speak English as her first language was like, oh, they're baby cow. They're oh, they're veal. All right, we'll take 2. So that is a picture of me and Linnea eating veal sausages inside the climate hub little area, which I just thought was hysterical.
The nicest thing about the climate hub area was it was the only area where they put out little drum circle seating areas made out of pallets.
Yes,
from Walmart or whatever, recycled shipping pallets and stuff. That was real nice. Everyone appreciated the seating areas, that's for sure. And it was around mealtime was the only time we ever saw a good amount of people there, and they were all eating from this one bratwurst stand, and it was great. They were terrific. And the other bratwurst, they were cooking 2 kinds. They had veal and chicken, and they both smelled really good.
Yes, they were delicious, I can say. Do I have any other photos here? Yeah, you cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet. So like Linnea was talking about, they have that degrowth aspect going around there. Definitely reuse signs from last year. Linnea met President Trump.
Definitely not AI. This is a real photo that really happened.
Gracious with his time, allowed us to get a snapshot with him. Do I have anything else?
I thought he was taller than that. Oh well.
he's kneeling down.
He's kind of in the back.
He looks very thin.
He's doing
wow,
good for him.
So one other kind of just overarching thing. So me and Linnea were talking about this on the way back. The idea of the understated climate aspect of it. When we were walking down the street, like I said, there was more big tech things, which is probably pretty standard. But it just really felt like the climate aspect of this was not as notable as I would have thought, especially if I were going to this maybe a few years ago. So Davos, if you don't know, it's a 5-day long conference. They have a bunch of main stage things. They have a bunch of breakout panels. They have 30 plus, presentations a day for 5 days. So they have tons of different panels. So if you go to their website, they have their whole schedule program listed out, and you can keyword search it. And I would always do that to see, where Al Gore is speaking or John Kerry or something like that. So on the train back, I wanted to test this theory that climate change was kind of getting the short stick this time around. So I searched climate in the schedule, and there was only 11 hits. And I said to Linnea, I'm like, I bet that is a far cry from what it used to be. So then I went backwards 1 year and I looked it up, and there was 20 hits for climate last year. I went backwards again a year, and there was 36 hits for climate 3 years ago. I went back one more year, and there was 45 hits for climate. So it's just been this downward trajectory over the past couple of years. And then I thought, AI is obviously a huge thing at the World Economic Forum. So I started looking at AI, keyword searching that. 4 years ago, there was like 10 hits for AI, 8 like single digits, like 8 hits or something. The following year there was like 16. Last year there was like 30, and then this year there was like 46. So it was almost like an inverse relationship between climate and AI stuff. And I just thought the Climate Hub was like a perfect representation. It like illustrated it perfectly. Just like, yeah, let's just push all the weirdo climate ayahuasca people that are selling mushrooms and stuff over here in this corner. And we'll try to entice people over there by putting a veal sausage truck out front. But yeah, that was, so there's a little bit of evidence there that kind of promotes the idea that the shine on the climate issue is starting to fade off when it comes to the World Economic Forum.
Donnie, just to add to that real quick. So I also did a lot of research on the Davos annual meeting this year. And although they were less forthright about their climate agenda, 2 of their themes were all about climate and resiliency. So if you look at their themes, 2 of them literally said climate change is affecting like everything, and we must, I'm going to try to get this verbatim, like we must execute the green transition like rapidly. And then another one was like resiliency within planetary boundaries. So I think that they are being less transparent with their sick climate agenda, but it's still there. Trust me. I can guarantee you that.
Definitely still there. It's just got like a different flavoring on it. So this year's overarching theme was a spirit of dialogue, and it was either last year or the year before that. It was like a oh gosh, it was something like we're facing a existential crisis or something, that there's 3 overlapping existential crises going on, one of them being climate change. So the spirit of dialogue just seemed to like take the temperature down a little bit. But yeah, you were right. There is like 4 major themes, 5 major themes, but they
look at that right there. How can we build prosperity within planetary boundaries? I looked at that, and it is just the usual stuff, just recycled and with a little new language on it.
yeah, definitely.
Well, and that's what that whole
all affected by climate change right there. About. Exactly. See?
Yeah. That finance panel that we sat in on for a couple minutes was pretty much what they were saying throughout. That was that, no one is like bragging about their climate stuff right now openly. They're caging it in other language to be kind of on the down low about it, because otherwise, between the public backlash and like Trump and stuff, none of them want to get caught up in it. So yeah, which means more than ever, we need to keep the pressure up on them.
Yeah.
We can't just say, oh, well, they're not worried about climate now, so we're going to turn our eyes off of that and go pay attention to something else. No, they are still doing it. We have to be careful.
Arguably it's even more dangerous that they're trying to cloud it now and couch it in in these other terms, because what they're trying to do is, I spent hours on their website last week just trying to really understand what they were all about this year, and they are trying to make it sound like this is about geopolitics and the war in Ukraine and all that stuff. No, it's not. It's the usual agenda. It's the Great Reset agenda still.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's the same, but it's just whatever vehicle they can use to get there, they'll use. So, yep. We have some videos too, or at least Donald took a video. We could show that.
All right, this is Donald again with the Emerging Issues Center at the Heartland Institute. We are at the Climate Hub here at Davos. Not quite as big, I think, as previous years, but I will say that I enjoyed a fantastic veal sausage over here at the Climate Hub. So, I don't know, I think we're getting a little mixed messages here at Davos this year. Yeah, that was my favorite video that I did.
Oh yeah, and also we ran. Okay, so also the thing to know about that barrier is basically where all the conservative journalists hang out, or like the right-wing journalists hang out, because they're waiting to like pounce on Al Gore and stuff when they leave that restricted area. It's like we're setting like an ambush, and so we hung out with them for a while, and we got to talking to some journalists that were there, and so we did this short interview with Vox Populi.
So I'm here with 2 people from the Heartland Institute. You You've come here to see what's going on in Davos, and you're actually running your own sort of forum that's kind of opposing this sort of stuff. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're running basically the anti-Davos World Prosperity Forum. We are in Zurich, Switzerland right now doing this live. It's kind of a counter to the World Economic Forum. I'm in charge of the Emerging Issues Center at the Heartland Institute, so we've been focused on a lot of the schemes coming out of the World Economic Forum for a while now. We did a whole lot of work on the Great Reset and the ESG scheme, so we're out here just seeing what's going on, just checking out the atmosphere.
And can you tell me about some of your, let's call it, climate commons?
Yeah, well, I mean, some people would call me a climate denier. That's utter nonsense, of course. But yeah, no, so the Heartland Institute is definitely one of the premier organizations pushing back against climate alarmism. And so once again, the World Economic Forum is probably, you know, almost ground zero besides the United Nations for a lot of the alarmism, especially when it comes to, you know, finance and big tech pushing it, ESG scores, all of that nonsense. So we're excited to be here and see what's going on and hopefully catch something interesting while we're here.
And you're not the only Americans here. I mean, your president is just a few hundred meters that way speaking to the world right now. What are your thoughts on his attendance this year?
Yeah, well, you know, I think he had a video stream last year where he really just dropped the hammer on the kind of the globalist agenda, and that's the one thing that's like probably the highlight of the Trump presidency is he's, you know, he just doesn't hold back when it comes to that. You know, when he's explaining that he's trying to clean up the economic chaos that was caused by the globalists. Oh, that's about.
Anyway, it was frozen up anyway.
So maybe Trump presidency is you know, he just doesn't hold back when it comes to that. You know, when he's explaining that he's trying to clean up the economic chaos that was caused by the globalists. That's just music to my ears.
And do you think that now Trump is in charge of the United States, we're going to see the Western Hemisphere drop all these climate taxes?
Is that a MasterCard logo right behind his head?
Yeah, it sure is.
Nice.
Okay,
Could this be big finance, you know?
Oh, you have no idea. I mean, there was Meta, like a Meta Pavilion, LinkedIn, like every major tech company had their own like building that they rented out along that main drag, and they would host their little panels and stuff in there. So it was pretty interesting. But yeah, that dog, the dogs had these gigantic muzzles on them that were like quick release muzzles so that they could go sick them on somebody if they wanted. And the one dog that was barking throughout the interview was like foaming at the mouth, like barking its darn head off. It was so mad that we were standing there.
I like how Donnie is just staring stoically into the distance, in the middle distance, waiting for him to be asked a question. And then, of course, just shadows out your face without a thought, you know.
I was actually hiding behind his shadow on purpose because the sun was so bright and I knew that I was going to be burned terribly, even though it was cold out. So I was kind of like sticking to the shadows the whole time. But anyway, so that leads me, though, to our final topic, which is on the reason why we were all there in the first place. It wasn't just so that we could go troll Davos. Jim, I want to hand this mostly to you to explain our wonderful World Prosperity Forum, what the Heartland Institute's vision is for it to the audience here. But, you know, we went all the way out there and we attracted some remarkably impressive speakers with our pretty humble event. So you could take it away if you want.
Yeah, so yeah, we did put this together pretty fast in 6 weeks. The idea was to put on a counter programming. You know, the World Economic Forum has been around since 1971. It has morphed into basically the global meeting of those who deign to run the world. And in many ways, they do run the world. Billionaires from industry, government leaders, and they think that well, Donnie, as you know, as Klaus Schwab said himself, you know, the world will be shaped by us, is what the the Bond villain Klaus Schwab had once said, and so they really do you know, they run the world, right? And they realize that they have the power to take their hammer and their anvil and to pound humanity into the shape that they desire. and pound our economy into the shape that they desire. And we decided that we need to put on a bit of a counter programming. We'll call it the World Prosperity Forum, because it is not through government control. It's not through socialism, basically, or technocracy, which is, to put the best light on it, of what the WEF has planned for us. But it is free markets and individual liberty. And that creates prosperity. And, free market capitalism has done more to lift more people out of poverty than any economic system devised by man. Democratic representative democracy is the greatest government ever devised by man. And only if you celebrate and honor and promote those things could you actually achieve the aims that the WEF says that they have for the world, which is, they want prosperity for all. Not really. So we decided to do the World Prosperity Forum, and we may do this. The hope is to do it every year, to go there, because it was pretty successful this time. We appreciate everybody watching online live, and now that have watched the videos as we start to put them out piecemeal. But we had Liz Truss, former Prime Minister of Great Britain. That's a pretty good get. We had her on our program. We had former Czech President Václav Klaus, one of the great leaders and champions and heroes of liberty, from formerly behind the Iron Curtain. He was one of our speakers. Of course, now that Andy has it up here on the screen, you have Lois Perry from Heartland UK Europe. And so we streamed live 3 hours a day, Monday through Friday, as counter programming to the World Economic Forum. And I was on another podcast actually yesterday talking a little bit about this trip. And I actually, if you wanted to see me not just rant on this podcast, but actually hear me give a proper presentation, there are two. I gave two of them at this event throughout the week. Donnie and Linnea both also had fantastic speeches, and we had leaders of freedom and elected officials from all across Europe. We have friends from Poland, friends from Hungary, like I said, Czech Republic, and Great Britain, and so we hope to expand the program even more in the future. But this sort of thing is necessary, because I think the World Prosperity Forum genuinely does speak for literally billions of people around the world who do not want to be managed by a global technocracy, or actually end up being, frankly, enslaved in many ways by that global technocracy as AI continues to proliferate. The real future that we deserve is a prosperous one, and that comes through the advancements of liberty, individual liberty, political and economic liberty, and free markets. And nobody else at Davos was talking about that. In Switzerland was talking about that. But I will just say two other things to kind of wrap this up. We got there a couple days before the event, or Davos started. So to get acclimated to the change of 7 time zones, but also to kind of get a feel. We want to get a feel of what is going to dominate the World Economic Forum this year. As Donnie had mentioned, for almost as long as anyone can remember, climate change, sustainability. That was the number one topic on everybody's minds. And of course, climate change was that because climate change has become the vehicle in which to impose ultimate controls over the population of the world. Because if you control energy, especially, you control everything. And if you tell human beings that them just living their lives is just literally destroying the planet, you can manipulate them and get them to be more compliant. Going into this World Economic Forum, there were two things, really only two things everyone was talking about: AI and Donald Trump. And it really didn't change. Those two topics really didn't change. But what we did see, if you search through Twitter, and you can find videos of a lot of the WEF muckety mucks giving speeches. Howard Lutnick from the Trump administration was there. His takeaway quote was, "Globalism has failed," as you might expect him to say. But even Larry Fink, who I believe is on the upper board of directors of the World Economic Forum, he gave a pretty remarkable speech. The takeaway line from that is that we have lost the trust of the people. And so and there was a lot of discussion like that when they weren't talking about AI or being scared of Donald Trump. There was more humility. Donnie, you've watched a lot of these as well, but there was a lot more humility in the rhetoric of the people speaking at the World Economic Forum this year, which I don't trust them. I don't trust they're actually more humble, but I think that they understand after, once again, the re-election of Donald Trump and really the rise of populism in European parliaments, especially Eastern Europe, they realize that they maybe have slipped a little, that they've lost such a firm grip on the agenda going forward. And so they might try to trick people into thinking they're listening to us. And maybe it's only temporary. But the World Prosperity Forum will be there to give the world the real pathway forward for a free and prosperous people.
Yeah, I loved this idea of the World Prosperity Forum. I really hope that this does become a annual thing that grows every year and becomes like a real counterpoint to the World Economic Forum's Davos conference. And there's a couple of things that kind of make me optimistic about that. At one of the nights there, James Taylor says that, and again, all of this is in the context of that we put this together in 6 weeks, which is just a miracle in itself that we were able to pull this off in such a short amount of time. 6 weeks is generally not a suitable amount of time to get high name speakers to come to your event in a different country and prepare a speech and all of that sort of thing. But what James said was that he would go and he would ask people, hey, would you like to take part in this conference? And he said that almost unanimously was an enthusiastic and an immediate yes, I absolutely do. And I think that this is a little data point that just shows the appetite for something like this, like the demand for a counterpoint that exists out there to the World Economic Forum Davos conference. And I think we just tapped into it. And we're the first people to tap into it. So I really, really hope that this becomes this huge thing. And the other thing that I really like about it is that it's a little bit more holistic in terms of the topic areas that we at the Heartland Institute cover. Obviously, bread and butter issues like climate and energy and all of that. But in reality, a lot of that stuff, the climate and energy stuff that we talk about, as well as a lot of the emerging issues stuff that we talk about, really have a similar root, which is pushing back against this globalist mandate, agenda, ideology, whatever you want to call it. And we are positioning ourselves really nicely to be that counterpoint to that messaging. So I thought the event was great, and I hope next year's is even greater.
What I am most proud of as, working at the Heartland Institute and being a part of the World Prosperity Forum is the fact that we are unapologizingly putting national sovereignty in the forefront, because I have been hearing for decades now, since I've kind of been in this world, about global citizenship and globalism is just inevitable. And no, it's not, because, a lot of people who live in America actually think of themselves as Americans first, not global citizens. So I do think that there's a very large appetite, not just here in America, but probably in places like Germany and France and, all these other countries where the people have been told, shut up and play along with our charade. And I do think that we are starting to see the beginning of the end of it. And that makes me just so happy. You have no clue.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's all the time we have today, you guys. Thank you to all of our audience here. We love that you guys showed up, even though we've been gone for all these weeks, and you're right back here when we started all up again. Thank you, everyone, for your attention to these matters. We are live every week, except for the weeks that we're not, on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere. So, Jim, what have you got for our audience today?
We have the return of the Climate Realism Show, which will be Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We're so happy to get back into the swing of that show, so we'll see you there.
Sam?
Thanks, stkarnick.substack.com, and please head to the Heartland Institute website for tons of great information and fabulous videos like this one.
Chris, what you got?
Yeah, so I got two quick things. First of all, this is National School Choice Week, so happy National School Choice Week. We need school choice. School choice is the solution. I'm a former teacher, and I cannot stress that, firm enough. And also, please go visit stoppingsocialism.com because I am putting some new content up there, and we are going to do a little relaunch of stoppingsocialism.com in the days and weeks to come. So please go check it out.
Absolutely. And Donald, what have you got?
That's right. Yeah. Well, Heartland.org, of course, stoppingsocialism.com. Yeah. We're definitely getting that going again. So I'll just reemphasize that. And of course, we've got our next big event will be the International Conference on Climate Change, which will be happening in Washington, D.C. In early April. I think it's April 8th and 9th. So you can go and find information about that. I'm sure they'll be talking about it more on the Climate Realism show tomorrow.
Absolutely. And for audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave us a review. Thank you so much to all of our panelists here and also to our viewers, of course. And we will see you again next week.